So the kids, they didn't use sticky notes, but we used sort of pixel art to create all of these amazing superheroes inspired by the task. And again, for me as an educator, it just goes to show the power of the task, how we as educators use that task to make sort of those math moments really meaningful for kids. And
Today, in
then
this
the
episode, we
power
chat with
of
Jordan
student
Rappaport,
thinking
a
and student
teacher from
learning.
Toronto, Ontario. Jordan's journey stretches from a traditional teacher to Make Math Moments Academy member to regional presenter, and now Jordan has joined us as a Make Math Moments curriculum writer. Yes, that's right. He is writing the tasks, some of the tasks, up on our tasks website.
Holy smokes, that sounds like quite the journey. I'm really interested in diving into this conversation with Jordan. And today, you're going to hear him share his expertise on how to begin that transformation from where he began, which actually sounds an awful lot like our beginnings, John, from that I do, we do, you do gradual release of responsibility lesson to a problem-based lesson format. Where and how to get started with problem-based lessons, and he also shares a strategy that you can use to help meet the needs of all students in your classroom while you're teaching through this approach. John, I'm super excited to dive in here with our new friend and colleague, Jordan Rappaport. How about you, my friend?
Let's do this.
Welcome to the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm John Orr. We are two math teachers from MakeMathMoments.com who, together,
with you, the community of math moment makers worldwide who want to build and deliver problem-based math lessons that spark curiosity,
fuel sense-making,
and ignite your teacher moves. Welcome, my friends, to another episode of the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. And today we're really excited to introduce you to someone who we've learned an awful lot about over this past year through the Academy. I've had an opportunity to see him present at recent online conferences, and he's hopping on board to join us as a part of the Make Math Moments curriculum writing team.
Yeah, we're really excited to share the conversation here with Jordan as he's joined our team. He's been writing problem-based units and lessons for you to use in your classroom. So really looking forward to getting into it because he shares such great insight into how to get started with problem-based lessons and units, but also like what you can do to get that curiosity going in your class. So let's get into it. Here we go.
Hey there, Jordan. Thanks for joining us here on the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. While John and I don't really need to know a little about yourself, the folks who are listening may want to know a little bit of your backstory. So first off, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you coming to us from? And give us maybe a snippet into your math teaching backstory.
Sure. Well, first off, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to get together and chat with you guys. So I'm coming from Toronto, Ontario. A little bit of a backstory on me, I guess. Well, first and foremost, I'm the proud dad of three boys, Micah, Lucas, and Sam, and I'm approaching my 16th anniversary with my wife. So definitely kudos to her for sticking with me for this long. That certainly
all that testosterone. I have the opposite problem.
Yeah. So in terms of, I guess, my journey and how I've sort of evolved into where I am right now, I guess it can be traced back to really when I was a teenager in high school. You know, the adults around me would always say things like, Jordan, you're going to be a teacher, or they would mention how I understood and connected really well with kids. But, you know, being a teenager at the time and knowing everything, I really wasn't interested in what they were saying because, like, I had all the answers, right? And so after high school, I went away to university with about 8 or 9 friends from home. And yeah, you know, in hindsight, that might not have necessarily have been the best decision I've ever made because you see, the actual school part of university was not necessarily high on my priority list or even on my radar, to the point where after my first year, I had accumulated a total of one half of one credit. Right. So try
I
explaining that
remember
to mom
guys
and
like
dad.
you.
Right.
Well, you just tell them that that's usually what people get,
Right.
and that's what everyone's doing these days, right?
Right. And I'll be honest, guys, like this is definitely not something I'm proud of, but years later, I really do recognize the value of having gone through this experience or that experience. And I think it really speaks to the importance of embracing the journey that we're all on. And I'll tell you, it took me a long time to come to believe that because really, I was always sort of that guy saying under his breath, journey? What journey? This is my career. But it wasn't until I fully embraced the journey I was on that I truly found myself on a path to discovery. So, came home after year two, took some time away from school, worked a little bit, eventually coming back to university at home, but really not making the commitment to becoming an educator until taking a sociology of education course the last semester of my undergrad. And truthfully, at that point, my credit accumulation and subsequent marks in those first 2 years were proving to be a bit of an obstacle to being accepted into any teacher training program at home. Right.
Right.
So, what I did was I took at the time what I consider to be a really big leap of faith. I applied to the University of Western Sydney in Australia, was accepted, and then made the decision to spend a year studying on the other side of the world. We, my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, ended up traveling through parts of Asia for several months after graduating before coming back to Canada, settling in Edmonton for a year while my wife did graduate work in speech pathology at the University of Alberta. And then while my wife stayed in Edmonton for another 6 months to finish studying, I came back home to Toronto to start my career, applying to every position and sending my resume out to every administrator imaginable. Eventually, and honestly, I think I must have gone on about 60 interviews. And I eventually landed a 4 month temporary contract, which evolved into a permanent position at a different school in the district that I currently work in. And it was at that school where I stayed for 16 years before transitioning to my current role in curriculum.
Wow, that is a journey. And I really appreciate that you reflecting on that journey and being honest here with us, because I think your story speaks to a lot of things that we talk about here on the podcast, but a lot of things that is going on with our education system. Like in one of our last webinars, we talked about this idea of what are marks, and like this idea of like your first year of university was just like holding you back from getting into teachers college here in Ontario, but you're flourishing as a teacher now. So it's like, why are these marks such a barrier? And I'm really excited to dive into that with you. But we got to get to our math moment, which is the title of the podcast. So, Jordan, you know what's coming here. Let us know when we say math class, what's a moment that sticks out to you in your experience as a student?
Right. So, quite honestly, guys, there are a bunch. Now, the one that I always sort of draw upon when sort of reflecting on both positive and memorable experiences that I went through as a student growing up is this. Now, while I don't quite remember the exact year, I think I can actually pinpoint the genesis of my journey as a mathematics educator to probably around 2008, 2009. I was about 4 or 5 years into my career, and I'd actually gotten started as a special education teacher, teaching in a community or a self contained class with a small cap on class size. So, in terms of my growth as a math educator to that point, it's safe to say that there really wasn't much. And for the most part, I was defaulting to what was familiar with what I experienced as a student growing up. Now, was this supportive of students? Probably not, but I'll be honest, I was likely still in that space of just needing to get through days. Now, it was towards the end of the school year that I was informed by administration that I was going to be transitioning into the role of a grade 8 homeroom teacher with a full timetable inclusive of grade 8 math, which I hadn't thought of, seen, or touched since I was in grade 8. So, to say nervousness started to set in would be a bit of an understatement. But if we can fast forward to Labor Day, the day before the start of the next school year, and I remember this distinctly. This was before kids, so it was just my wife and me. And I remember confiding in her that I was literally scared out of my mind. to be teaching math, like actual scared out of my mind. So the school year started, and what did I do? Well, I did what I did best at the time, and that was default to what I knew. Students in rows, textbook questions, watch what I do. Now it's your turn. Let's take it up. Now some practice questions, and then how about some homework for a little bit of added flavor? Didn't take me too long to realize that, hey, this really isn't working. First, I, meaning me as the teacher, am finding this to be really boring. So if I'm finding this boring, I can only imagine what students must have been thinking, right? And then, plus, by judging by the looks on most students' faces, they definitely weren't buying what I was trying to sell. And this went on for a while until I finally said to myself, okay, enough is enough, and committed to making a change. And I'll be honest, like I had no clue what that change was, who to ask, where to look, or even if any other approaches existed. But you know what? I figured I had to start somewhere. So with search engines and Google being what they were and are, I set out on a quest to find something, really anything that I can engage students with. And I'll be honest, I wasn't necessarily concerned or even thinking about content. It was all about engagement I was after. And I remember after trying a whole bunch of stuff that didn't work, I eventually landed on something. It was like an epiphany for me at the time, but something called problem based learning. And for me, that was like taking a little peek down the rabbit hole to a whole new world of possibilities. So I did what I ordinarily do when I find something that speaks to me at my core. I jumped headfirst down the rabbit hole, and 10, 12 years later, here we are.
That is a fantastic story. And it's interesting because when we're asking people to share some of their memories, sometimes we have memories. Maybe it's our own memories, or maybe it's just something we bumped into where we've seen that or heard that happening. And it sounds almost identical to the way I envision the beginning of my career, except the only difference is that you were sitting there sort of scared to teach math in grade 8. I wasn't scared to teach high school math,
Right.
but I should have been.
Right.
Like I went in
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
same tools you went in with.
Right.
And I went in there, chest out, confident. Hey, we're going to do this thing. And I vividly remember feeling a lot of those same feelings that you felt, which was kind of bored and like, especially a semester where I had to teach the same class 2, sometimes 3 times in a day, where when you go through a boring lesson one time,
Yeah.
it's like one thing, but then it's like, I got to do this 2 more times. And it's like, you can almost feel this like negative sort of energy in the room. Like maybe
Absolutely.
people aren't like mean about it, but it's just sort of like not enjoyable. It's like not a place that you really want to be. And like you said, I wonder what the students are feeling or thinking. And sometimes you have a class where students kind of sit there and they comply and they, just sort of, hey, I'm going to do whatever I'm supposed to do. And then you could also have the other end of the spectrum where students tell you exactly how they feel and sometimes not in the nicest way.
Right.
So clearly that experience that you just shared with us has had a huge influence on how you're teaching today. I'm curious, do you recall, like I know for myself, I vividly recall the moment when I bumped into problem-based lessons. I didn't even realize that's what it was at the time. To me, it was 3-act math tasks, and I was looking for the same thing. It was for engagement. I didn't realize how, I guess, complex and interesting the math itself was. I was looking for any opportunity to get students to look my way. And for me, it was Dan Myers at an OAME conference. And that for me was like, whoa, light bulb went on. And I was like, this could be different. And of course, the journey then began, a big, long journey that we're still on. So I'm wondering, do you remember what resource you bumped into? And I guess take us a little bit further down there. Like, how did it go as you started unpacking that? Did you fall on your face at all? Did you feel good? Like,
No, he was
take us
perfect out
down
the
there.
gate.
Yeah, exactly.
No, yeah, exactly. No obstacles, no bumps on the road. Everything went famously well. No, seriously, I'll be honest, those first few resources, I don't remember. I didn't catalog them, but I know I accessed them through my district's math page on our board's website at the time. And if I remember correctly, there was a model where consultants at the time came into schools and were working with teams of math teachers, sort of using a 4Cs protocol where we would co-plan, co-teach, co-debrief, and co-reflect on a lesson. And it was all framed around problem-based learning. And having that opportunity, again, to actually build the problem, be able to deliver the problem, reflect, and then to be able to refine and tweak and then apply that into my practice moving forward, again, was a huge aha moment for me, just in terms of the possibilities that sort of were out there to be able to engage kids in or with students in meaningful mathematics that they could connect to. But I do remember distinctly sort of how I landed on sort of the discovery of 3-act tasks. So similar to what you mentioned, Kyle, I have seen Dan present at OAME. It was a couple of years ago, but watching his TED Talk video on math class needs a makeover. So it was that and Dan Finkel's 5 Principles of Extraordinary Math Teaching, which honestly, like 10 years, 11 years later, I probably still watch those videos a couple of times a year just because I find them so valuable, so inspirational. The messaging in there, I think, still holds very true today and really still influences not necessarily the tasks that I'm building or the tasks that I'm using to engage with students, but really how to approach mathematics teaching and learning and how to support students through an assets-based lens and in an environment where all students see themselves as confident, capable problem solvers. But I can also sort of pinpoint it was probably around, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, where I actually did discover my first 3-act task. And it was actually 2 tasks in particular: Donut Delight and R2D2 sticky notes that completely reeled me in, hook, line, and sinker. So I was very fortunate. So in my career, I did mention earlier that as a special education teacher, I transitioned into grade 8 teacher. And then there was about a 5-year period where I was either teaching a straight grade 8 homeroom or a combined 7-8 homeroom. And then that 5-year period elapsed. And then I had a conversation with my administrator. And at the time, she sort of put it out there for me that would I consider a transition down to grade 4? So transitioning from grade 8 to grade 4. Never having taught really in the junior division apart from physical education and perhaps a couple of Rotary subjects as well. But I remember distinctly telling her that for me to continue to grow as an educator, I can't find myself getting complacent, because if I get complacent, I get comfortable and I'm not going to grow in my comfort zone. So then I followed that up to her with, I need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. So I transitioned down to grade 4, which was a big jump for sure. But at that point, I felt I was gaining confidence in my practice and certainly learning a great deal in terms of mathematics education, going on any professional learning opportunities that came my way, really to sort of grow and evolve my practice. But it was one day where Donut Delight, and this is when I was teaching grade 4, appeared in my inbox out of nowhere. I have no idea how, but somewhere in the math heavens was looking down upon me on that day. And I went through the task, and in a similar way to when I first discovered problem-based lessons or problem-based units, the rabbit hole just sort of expanded exponentially. And I could not believe what was before my eyes. And I said to myself, we've got to do this task like tomorrow. So we went through the task. I didn't do it the next day. There's obviously a little planning and a little more familiarity that needed to happen on my end. But we went through the task the next day. And I still remember to this day how impactful that lesson was on creating such a positive, memorable experience for all of the students in the class, like all of the students in the class. From the very first video when they're showing the Krispy Kreme donuts, how they're made, to engaging students with a quick notice and wonder, to all of the sequels and extensions that were built in, like it was absolutely phenomenal. Now, I taught grade 4 that year. We didn't go with all of the extensions that we're building and all the sequels that are building in the task. We didn't go through everything because at the time the kids weren't necessarily ready for it, right? So the next year I was teaching a grade 4-5 class. So many of my grade 5s that year were actually my grade 4s the previous year, right? So with that group, with the 4-5 group, we then approached going through the extensions and the sequels that we didn't have a chance to go through while those students were in grade 4. Fast forward to the next year, I'm teaching a 6-7.
Hmm.
So sure enough, many of those
Very
sixes,
vertical.
right? So we continue to sort of work our way through the task. Fast forward the following year, I'm teaching a grade 7 class. Guess what? Several of my grade 6 students the previous year are my grade 7 students. And throughout the course of that 4-year period, we were able to work through all 3 acts and then all of the sequels and the extensions that were built in. And to this day, I still use that task with classrooms that I might be supporting, with educator groups that I'm working with. That was the one that really sort of hooked me in. And then R2D2 sticky notes as well. My experience using that task was really so student driven that after we got through the task, and honestly, John, like the kids love seeing you put all the sticky notes up, and it was awesome. Like total engagement and deep, deep, rich learning to the point where we got to the point where students never wanted to, they didn't want to finish. They never wanted class to end, to the point where the bell would go and they'd be like, Mr. Rappaport, is it okay if we like don't go to French? And I'm like, you got to go to French, but I'll be here during lunch if you guys want to continue. And then that sort of went on for like a full week, to the point where kids were like, okay, we're into superheroes. We saw what John did with those R2D2 sticky notes. I bet we can one up that and we can build our own. So the kids, they didn't use sticky notes, but we used sort of pixel art to create all of these amazing superheroes inspired by the task. And again, for me as an educator, it just goes to show the power of the task, how we as educators use that task to make sort of those math moments really meaningful for kids. And then the power of student thinking and student learning to really take it in a direction that I had never envisioned. And it was just like, we're talking, that was probably about 6 years ago now. From beginning to end, those memories are so vivid. And the reason is, it's not necessarily the mathematics that I sort of am recalling as the biggest piece for kids. It's that positive experience that students are going to draw upon when thinking about, oh, yeah, like I remember that time with Mr. Rappaport where he said his buddy John was building this wall with sticky notes and then we got to do our own. My hope really is if any of the students in that class sort of reflect back on that experience, they're going to remember how they felt during that time that we worked through that task.
What a cool story. And again, I think we all have these different tasks that we sort of tried for the first time, right? And while I'm sure that you probably have used those tasks again in the future and probably feel like you can facilitate them maybe more succinctly than you did the first time, like for me, it was Hot Coffee by Dan Meyer. Or actually, I think Hot Coffee and Taco Cart were two of the first tasks that I had tried. We'll make sure to link all this up in the show notes. But two things I really wanted to hit on here. First off, part that I really enjoyed or really liked that you sort of shared with everyone is this idea of writing a context. And I feel like we spend so much time creating contexts in our math class, like creating this problem about some random idea over here, and then another problem completely about something different, all around the same concept in math. Rather than taking a context and sort of building on that. And you were able to do that not only for multiple days, but you were able to do that over multiple years, right? With this group that you sort of followed up, which is super cool. And then the other piece that I really like is how you were able to take some of these ideas, especially in an elementary setting where you're teaching all subjects or a good chunk of subjects, the same group of students all day, where you can kind of get cross curricular, right? And like take a context, build on it, bring it into art and bring it into literacy block or whatever it might mean. I think that's a really, really cool thing. And I'm going to let the cat out of the bag here, Jordan. One of the reasons we invited you on the podcast is because you were on our radar actually probably over a year ago when you first joined us in the academy, and you join us on some of the Q&A calls that we do, and you were always sharing, just like you are here on the podcast, like sharing great ideas, big wins, challenges like all of us are facing. And it was great to get to know you in that experience. And since then, I've had the opportunity to be one of the, what they called, I think, the technical host for your OAME session on assessment that you had shared recently. And actually, now we've actually asked you to kind of join us in writing curriculum for Make Math Moments. And I'm wondering if someone who's listening and they're sort of sitting there thinking and they're on this journey, right? They might not realize that the journey's begun yet because maybe they're still teaching in a gradual release of responsibility model, right? Just like they were taught. Or maybe they've just started kicking the tires of problem-based lessons, or maybe they're much further along, but they're still kind of feeling like there's some pieces missing. They're listening to you and they're kind of likely looking at your journey and kind of going, wow, like there's a lot of growth, there's a lot of learning going on there. What sort of advice might you give someone who's maybe earlier in this journey and they're trying to get over, we'll call it like that first hump of like conviction that, yes, this work, this effort is worth the while? Like, what might you share with them? What might you recommend with them? And where should they get started, I suppose?
Right. I've been very fortunate in my journey. I've learned from the best. Okay. And so, what I mean by that is once that sort of rabbit hole was opened up for me, I'm not going to call it a mission, but maybe it was a bit of a mission. I was on a mission to consume as much learning as possible. Not all of it was something that I was able to apply into my own practice because it might not necessarily have met with the students I was servicing at the time, or didn't sort of resonate with me as an educator. But I consume learning, and I wasn't afraid to try things out, knowing that there's probably a better chance that things are going to fail miserably than I would experience success. And you need to be okay with that. And then my approach over time and sort of my mindset was everything is feedback for us, right? Like everything is information, and everything that kids are doing in class in terms of how they are responding to us as educators is also assessment for us and feedback for us. So if things failed miserably, and like I said, they failed more often than I can even remember, I sort of committed myself to believing that it's not really failure in sort of that kind of traditional sense of failing. It's information for me. And then it's incumbent upon me to be able to use that information in order to improve my own practice. So it was really sort of committing to that idea of really try everything. Some things are going to work, some things aren't, but it's a matter of being reflective and refining practice over time. And I mean, listen, like I've been an educator now 17 years. So I can confidently say I'm on year 17 of my journey. I don't know where the journey is taking me. And that's actually part of the allure of being on this journey. And with each new opportunity, it kind of seems like a new chapter is being written. I've also been extraordinarily fortunate to surround myself with really strong, critical friends who are going to tell me what I need when I need to hear it. So, having sort of that inner circle where if I'm playing with ideas, want to try something out new, and I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, developing that confidence to reach out to a trusted friend or colleague and say, hey, you know what? John and Kyle, I'm thinking about doing this. This is going to be my approach. This is how I'm going to respond if I see this. What do you guys think about that? Having a few of those trusted critical friends to be able to give you their honest assessment and honest feedback back to you is only going to help you grow as an educator. I was fortunate the last 4 years, the last 4 years where I was at my school, to work with, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the most supportive administrator I could ever imagine. Any idea, any harebrained idea that I thought at the time that I had that I wanted to try out with the kids. As long as everyone was safe, no fire hazards or anything like that, he was good with it. Why? Because I was demonstrating a level of taking a risk in order to support the students that I was servicing. And that support only grew and was ongoing throughout my time, throughout my remaining years at the school. And honestly, it was in that type of environment where I truly felt supported and safe to try new things that I was really, really able to grow to the point where, so just sort of a sidebar, but not really. And before, let me just preface this by saying, if any of the listeners out there are going to try this, make sure you have a really good relationship with your administrator.
This sounds like caution. Don't
Yeah,
try this
big
at
time,
home.
big time. So Robert Kaplinski has a task on a site, and it's tinfoiling one of your colleagues' cubicles. So I saw that, and I'm like, hey, sounds like a good idea. We're going to try something out like that in class. So this is when I was teaching grade 7, and I sort of brought it up with students in the class, and I was like, okay, what do you guys think about maybe tinfoiling another classroom? And we got to talking about it, and the conversation went in many, many different directions. Then one of the students in the class said, okay, that would be fun, but what if we tinfoil the principal's office? And so I'm thinking, okay, this is totally doable. Let's see where we can connect. Where's the mathematics here, right? Because we're not just going to tinfoil the principal's office for fun, although that would be kind of fun, right? But we got to connect it to curriculum. Okay, so if we're talking about tinfoiling the principal's office, so now we're talking about concepts of measurement, surface area. We've got to go out, we've got to buy the tinfoil. So let's go out and find the best deal, and let's sort of price match and sort of all those pieces. So aspects of proportional reasoning found its way into it. So really, really cool. And students sort of did all the planning. Now, the challenge was, how are we going to tinfoil the principal's office? Like, he's in the school, right? It's going to take about a good half an hour. How are we going to do this? So, as luck would have it, we're a single administrator school. And whenever my administrator was out of the building, I would sort of fill in the role as principal designate. So, as it turns out, he's going to be out of the building the Friday before April Fool's Day. April Fool's Day was falling on the Monday. And sure enough, I'm going to be principal designate for that day that he's out of the building. At that point, we had done all the planning. It took us about 2.5 weeks to plan this task. We had all the tinfoil. We're ready to go. He's going to be out of the building. This is amazing. Thursday rolls around. He's like, oh, Jordan, my meeting got canceled. I'm going to be in the building tomorrow. I'm like, oh, no. What are we going to do? So as luck would have it, luck seems to kind of follow me a little bit wherever I go. As luck would have it, I also had a relationship with the administrator at his previous school. So I quickly phone her up and I say to her, okay, this, and she's like, again, next level amazing, right? So I say to her, I'm like, okay, this is the plan. We need him out of the building. I just need him out of the building for like an hour so we can get this done. So she's like, okay, Jordan, don't worry, leave it to me. Sends him an email that they're having an emergency EQAO meeting at their school. They need to fill out a quorum. He needs to be there. So he commits to going. He's out of the building until about 10 o'clock. This is amazing. So we arranged for the kids and myself. There was about 10 students in the class that wanted to volunteer to actually do the tinfoiling. So we meet in front of the school. It's like 7:30 in the morning. We get all the materials, and no one else in the school knows about this, right? So if you can picture a teacher with 10 kids in the principal's office, secretaries are there. They hear all this sort of banging around and all this, and they're like, what the heck is going on? So I pop out. We're in the midst of tinfoiling the office. Don't worry, we're just playing a little bit of a practical joke. So it took us about half hour, 45 minutes. We tinfoiled everything in the office to the point where at the time he had a snake in the office and we were this close to tinfoiling the snake. We didn't, but in any event, he came back in the building at about 10 o'clock. We saw him coming in, and I pretended as though, as he was walking in, that I was quote unquote disciplining these students in front of the office. So he sees this going on. We open the door to the office. He's walking towards his office, hands full. One of the students in the class opens the door to his office, and sure enough, wall to wall, floor to ceiling, tinfoil. he erupts in laughter. The kids go nuts. I go nuts. And it was just such an amazing experience for everyone, but really speaks to the importance of having support and feeling supported so that as educators, we can try new things, right? Because if we're not trying new things, like I said before, right, we get complacent. And I know for me, speaking contextually, if I'm not trying new things, if I'm not trying to grow or evolve my practice, then really, how can I say I am truly servicing the students that I'm working with?
Yeah, and I think it's a great message to leave teachers as something that you need to look for and also kind of search out is that support. I think we all have talked about that, is sought that support, like maybe it's a colleague, maybe it's your administrator, but I think if you're going to start with problem-based lessons, finding someone I think is helpful, but also having that support to like have your back is super important. And I'm glad that you had that. And I wanted to touch back on when you said venturing down this path of problem-based lessons in your journey had that allure of that journey kept you going. And I think that's resonated for me for sure, because I was like what Kyle said, he was like, you were teaching your lessons. Like, I don't know if I was actually bored about my lessons, but I felt like I could see the future of like, this is what it was going to look like every day. But I feel like when I went down to that problem-based lessons task and went down that path, just like you, Jordan, it opened my eyes to being like, I can see this. This is now going to be, there is something here. And there's a lot of curiosity here for me, but also for my students. And I wanted to like touch on, now that you are writing curriculum tasks for the Make Math Moments, the tasks we have on our website, I wanted to get your take on like some of the action items teachers should do. Like if you think, like you kind of mentioned already, like seek support is a super important thing, but what is like an action change? And I call this like the biggest, smallest change, like something small you can change, but has a huge effect on your classroom teaching. And since you're writing these tasks for teachers to use in their classrooms, I'm wondering like, what would you suggest? It's like, it's got to be the biggest, smallest change. So it's something that's a very like, we can do this tomorrow, but it's going to have a huge effect. For example, I think like Kyle and I would often say like, hey, using whiteboards vertically became this huge change for us while we were using the problem-based tasks on our website. But I'm wondering like, what would you say is like the biggest, smallest change that teachers could make going into their lessons tomorrow?
So one of the biggest shifts in my practice over time, and I'll be honest, and I use the word time there, this can be somewhat time consuming in terms of the front loading piece when we're planning different tasks and activities, whatever it happens to be that we're going to be engaging in with students. But it's really taking the time before you deliver a lesson or a task to, as best you can, go through the task yourself. And really, that provides so many different opportunities to be able to anticipate how students might respond. And then conversely, how you might be responsive to students in the moment. And this accomplishes several things. Okay. So, number one, right away, it's just increasing your familiarity with the task and certain things that you could be listening for, or even more importantly, sort of listening to. And if we truly want to support students where they are in their growth and their development, we need to be able to be responsive to them in the moment. And so, taking the time beforehand to go through the task as best you can. And look, I get it. I know it. I've lived it. We're all super busy and timing doesn't always necessarily allow. But if we prioritize that in terms of the framework or the process that we're using for planning, to be able to take the time to go through the task, to be able to anticipate responses, and then sort of begin to develop and construct either, prompting questions, hints or extensions that are going to support students in the moment so we can keep moving them or nudging them along their developmental trajectory. And the reality is, and again, speaking from an elementary context, if I'm teaching a class of 25 students, by and large, I'm going to have 25 different entry points, right? And students are going to move along their developmental trajectory at a pace that is reflective of where they are in their learning at that particular moment in time. So, sort of, I'll call it like a bag of tricks, but like having that bag of tricks of hints, prompts, and extensions in your back pocket so you can truly be responsive to the students in the moment, that's really servicing the students where they are. And we talk about the art and the science of teaching. That's more of the art piece, sort of being able to read the room, read body language, listening to students' conversations, observing how they're engaging in the task, and sort of being able to jump in at the right time with the right hint, prompt, or extension to keep what Peter Liljedahl calls keep students in flow. So if students are getting frustrated, they don't get too frustrated, or if students are ready to be pushed, they don't get bored because you're able to jump in at the right time with the right extension to keep moving students along their developmental trajectory. So that was the biggest, smallest change, was committing to making that a part of my planning process.
I love that. And Jordan, like reflecting as you're saying those things, I'm going back to my first few problem based lessons. And at the time when you're trying something new, there's so much that's different that it's really hard to sort of reflect in a meaningful way. Like, of course, you're reflecting, going, okay, well, this part went well, this part didn't. But trying to narrow down why things went the way they did can be awfully difficult. So, couple messages I'm hearing. We talked about this idea of like finding colleagues to collaborate with, whether they're in the building or somewhere else, so that you can kind of talk through those things. But then I'm also realizing in this moment, I don't think I've thought about this, but in the Make Math Moment problem based units that we create, and now you are helping to create here as a part of our writing team, that is a huge part. And obviously, one of the reasons why we thought you would be a great fit for our team is thinking about those things ahead of time. And had I done those things early on, I feel fairly confident that the outcome of those early lessons could have been much different. Obviously, never perfect, but had I thought ahead of what different students in my class may do, where they might get hung up, what sort of approaches they might come with, and thought about the actual like math that they're going to do and anticipating those solutions, and then again, having those purposeful questions ready to go, I think is something that really could have been a game changer for me so much earlier. So I think that's a big one. We were going to ask you for a big takeaway, but I feel like that is a big takeaway. So we're looking at the time, and we don't want to take up the rest of your evening. So we are going to start wrapping up here. But Jordan, I want to let the community know we are getting close to wrapping up your first problem-based unit with the Make Math Moments team. And right now, can we share the potential title? It may change by the time it goes live, but I thought it was great. I'm going to let you say it because you came up with it, and I think it's kind of a cool title and hopefully leaves people a little curious for when it hits the task area.
Right. So the working title right now, and this has definitely evolved, is Pop Goes the Volume. Now, in saying that, I was actually thinking the other day about the evolution of this current unit. And while the unit from a content perspective is, and I use the word volume, while the unit from a content perspective is centered around volume, it definitely did not start out that way. Now, I can trace the roots of this unit to last summer while I was at a baseball tournament that my oldest son was in. And as things sort of evolve at these events, there was lots of snacks and drinks and stuff like that for the kids and the siblings. And my youngest son, Sam, who was 4 at the time, happened to find a package of Timbits. Now, to know Sammy is to know that he's a pretty big fan of donuts and chocolate and candy and anything that he could really, consume. Now, with most of the adults focused on the game and with a box of Timbits in his hand, he ate one, and then another, and then another, and then another, and he kept going. He's like the Energizer Bunny of Timbits, right? And keep in mind that while he's working towards setting some sort of record, we're watching the baseball game. Eventually, it's in between innings, and Sammy dropped one of the Timbits. And after reacting in a way that you might come to expect from a 4-year-old and ignoring the existence of any 5-second rule, I sort of wondered in my mind how Sammy would manage with a baseball sized Timbit. And from there, the idea sort of stuck, and I kind of kept it in the back of my mind, knowing that eventually, some point in time, this is going to evolve into a task somewhere, somehow. And then, we started talking about me coming on board and writing for the community. I produced a draft copy of a lesson based on that context. And now, without revealing too much, what I can say is through the process of writing from this developmental framework, baseball sized Timbits, although really tempting to eat, are really no longer in the picture for this unit whatsoever. And I think that really speaks to the collaborative nature that we're sort of approaching building this unit, in that, like I mentioned earlier, the importance of having trusted colleagues that you can bounce ideas and run ideas off of. I mean, that is clearly evident in the work that we're doing here. Even as recently as Saturday, Kyle, when we chatted and we were just riffing on ideas, having that opportunity to be able to share thinking in a safe space has really, honestly, I'm just really grateful for it, because it's opened my eyes to so many more things.
Awesome. I totally agree. I think the support that we can get from each other and share that with the Make Math Moments community is going to be wonderful. And I'm really looking forward to your task coming in. And actually, probably by the time listeners listen to this episode, it will be out and ready. And hey, if you want to check out Jordan's task, you can all head on over to makemathmoments.com/tasks. That's where we have all of our tasks and our classroom units. Jordan is also coming up in November. He will be presenting at our 3rd annual virtual summit. Right, Jordan?
Ooh.
Yeah, that's super pumped about that. So the idea, I guess, can I share the idea?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, where it stands now, right? You
Right,
might change your mind
exactly.
by then, but where it stands.
Right. So the idea right now, where it stands, is I'm going to sort of document my process for writing this first unit. And then I'll deliver a presentation based on all the wins, all the sort of non wins, sort of everything that I've gone through to go from watching my son eat a whole box of Timbits to creating this multi day unit that no longer has anything to do with donuts. And I'm hoping that that will be able to support educators in their journey as sort of they begin to see what goes into being able to produce a unit.
I love it. I love it. Jordan, it's been awesome bringing you on here. And I'll tell you, you talked a lot about your journey, some of which we were unaware of as we have known each other, I suppose, from a outside of Twitter space for really only about a year, a little more than a year. And so we learned a lot about you today. I love that I'm seeing this awesome journey, even in just this last year. And again, having an opportunity to watch you present. Folks, you're going to want to definitely check out Jordan's session at our upcoming virtual summit. And my friends, for those who are like eager and they're like, I want to start writing awesome problem-based math lessons and tasks, definitely reach out to us. We are always looking for other perspectives. And really, we're trying to think of how do we be more culturally responsive? So having writers from different parts of the world is definitely something that we're really trying to achieve. And my friends, it has been awesome. Jordan, we want to thank you for hanging out with us. Where can they find you if they want to find you in between now and the virtual summit? How can they get in touch with you?
So, two best places, I guess, to reach me. You can always check me out on Twitter at jrappaport27, or you can fire me an email, jordanrappaport27@gmail.com. 27 is kind of pervasive in a lot of my addresses and stuff like that. It's an old hockey number. But in any event, yeah, Twitter is probably the best. And then shoot me an email. Always happy to connect.
Awesome stuff. We want to thank you so much, Jordan, for joining us, and we will talk soon. Take care.
Awesome. Thanks, boys.
Have a good one, my friend. As always, John and I learned so much from every interview that we do here on the podcast. But remember, in order to ensure we hang on to any of this new learning so it doesn't wash away like footprints in the sand, make sure that you're doing some form of reflection on what you've learned. I know for me, sometimes in the car, I'll leave myself a memo on my phone and just sort of talk about some of the ideas that I've heard on a podcast. Or maybe you write things down, or maybe you do a sketch note. Whatever it is that you choose to do to reflect, make sure that you're doing something and make an intentional plan to take action on at least one small change from this episode here today.
Yeah, and a great way to hold yourself accountable is, like Kyle said, to write it down, or even better, you can share it with someone like your partner or colleague. Or, hey, we've got the Math Moment Maker community standing by to help you out. You can head on over to the free private Facebook group, Math Moment Makers K through 12, or hit us up on social media like Twitter or Instagram at Make Math Moments.
Absolutely. And remember, every Monday we are releasing an episode, and it really helps the entire community ensure that they're aware this podcast exists by hitting that subscribe button. And also remember, ratings and reviews are super helpful. Not only do they fill our hearts with happiness and excitement and also that energy to keep this going, but it also helps with the algorithms out there so that more math moment makers can find this podcast and do some learning and join the journey like you have.
Show notes and links to resources from this episode, plus complete transcripts to read from the web or download and take with you, head on over to makemathmoments.com/episode 148. Again, that's makemathmoments.com/episode 148.
Well, until next time, Math Moment Makers, I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm John Orr.
High fives for us.
And a high five for you.